and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. I'm here with my trusted friend, colleague, podcast cohort, Piper Sample, who I'll bring out in just a second. But we're here ostensibly to dive into the tail end of Orange County, which I think a lot of people were in agreement ended on a very strange, unsettling note for a number of reasons. I definitely was drawn to it, especially that last part of the reunion where they dove more deeply into the Gretchen social media of it all. And I think a lot of people were left wondering, what are we watching? And that's often the question that we're contemplating even deeper, more macro level on this podcast. And I think especially because we'd already opened up the doorway to looking at Orange County's political allegory on this podcast. And then literally politics entered the show in the finale. Again, in sort of a strange, unexpected way that somewhat came out of nowhere. And I've just been sitting with it. And yeah, I've been drawn to this question, as always, of what are we watching, both in terms of the arena of the show itself, in terms of these women as archetypal energies and their personal narratives, but then as a reflection of whatever is going on in the world that created this waking dream, this collective waking dream of the Real Housewives of Orange County. So who better to join me on this journey than Orange County resident herself, Piper.
Hi, Jamie.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's a sunny day in Southern California, Orange County. Feeling very disconnected from the Orange County that is represented on this show, but feeling deeply connected to my own version.
Yeah, and so, we're kind of already in it. I won't bore people with the details, but this is just one of those episodes where it's kind of been riddled with obstacles and technical difficulties and almost feeling like Piper and I are both circling around getting into this episode. And as is always the case, it just really, I think, struck both of us that somehow that seemed representative or energetically connected in some way to what we are watching on screen at the tail end of this season. In particular, I am really drawn to that notion of circling around something without ever getting into the actual meat of it. And I notice it's funny because it's like right before we started recording, you said something. I almost wish we had been recording, but when we were kind of addressing and presencing the energy that we were sitting with heading into this episode, you said something about the enormity of the topic. I think you said something about that, but also what wasn't being said. And you just sort of mentioned that briefly, but I feel the fear here. It feels and it doesn't feel like my own. It feels like there's fear around the content that's being brought into the show, that's being brought into Orange County, which might explain sort of, I don't know if I want to call it the network, the production company or the network's decision and how they decided to proceed with this, but we'll get there. But yeah, I just want to name that. I feel, I agree with you. There's something here that feels very big. It feels like the show circled around it. I can feel in this space and energy of circling around it. And then, like I said, a fear that's in there to really get into what I want to call the meat of it. So maybe we can just kind of hold an intention it's almost like what I want to say to you as like my co-pilot on this is that we can maybe let ourselves circle around it a little bit and find our way gently into the meat of it to kind of respect whatever this sort of energetic pattern is that's emerging around, this topic of Gretchen and hate posts and hate rhetoric. But I think even deeper than that, like the political conversation that emerged. So having said that, like I was mentioning to you, I was just rewatching like the finale dinner where, really Gina brings it up, but she brings it up by way of Tamra, which even that right there, there's a circle, right? It's like, it's not coming directly from Tamra. It's coming from Tamra via Gina. And then when people bring that up, Tamra doesn't want to acknowledge that. She wants to shut that shit down pretty quickly. So yeah, like I said, even right there, there's a circular indirect pattern to all of this. So I was just watching that and it did kind of just give me an initial place to start to run by you as just, as kind of like our jumping off point. But is there anything you need to say before I dive into this?
Yeah, I think maybe what I would say is I want to really ground in my intention, to be curious and open, but also anchor my relationship to reality and to truth. Because I think my hesitation or my circling has something to do with my relationship to kind of feeling caught in some sort of manipulation that I don't want to be any part of. Like, there's like a personal relationship to being an observer to this kind of chaotic and manipulative half truth posing as something and feeling caught in something that like feels gross to me. And I just want to stay anchored to my deep, deep curiosity about what this is reflecting and not to just land on the reflection itself, but to also, I guess, offer a way to be with in a generative and support for maybe getting outside of something that we're asked to be circling around. I don't mean to say outside of the circle, but like to feel my own energy in relationship to the circling that happens.
And I'm assuming when you talk about like the manipulation of something that's kind of posing as something without sort of being in its own authentic energy, I'm assuming, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about both participants in the like people on the reality show and also the reality show itself and the narrative that it's constructing, in particular to deal with this issue, which again, we'll get into. But so yes, that's correct. I see. Okay.
Yes. Media in general.
But I think, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's really striking to me how the show decided to deal with this. And, I'm just hearing the words deflection, denial. It really felt like something got opened up and the show really backed away from it in a big way. And was like, we're not, it's like if I had to give subtext or like a dialogue to the show, it was like, we are not dealing with this. We are not actually opening this up. We're not going anywhere near taking responsibility for it. Like we are going to close this up as neatly and tidily as we can without ever actually really getting, again, into the meat of it. I notice when I say that, I start to feel really sad, actually.
It's such a heartbreak.
Okay, it's interesting. Okay, I'll force myself to stay on track because when you said that, when you said the heartbreak, I do want to say, like, I do have major issues with the way that this was navigated by Tamra, for sure. There was something very destructive happening there. But fast forwarding, I do want to say, like, I really felt it almost felt like desperation at the end when everything got turned on her in a way that to me felt absolutely ridiculous. I felt like a devastation in her that felt real to me. Now, I'm not saying she didn't co-create this with this whole, obviously she initiated this whole narrative, but it's just interesting when you talk about, you just said, I was feeling the sadness and then you What did you do you remember what you just said?
Said it's a heartbreak.
I almost wonder if on some level, we talk about archetypal energy, that heartbreak was moving through Tamara at the end, even though, again, her motives were not pure in this, which we're going to get into. So anyways, let me come back to the beginning because I'm now circling around by skipping to the end. But yeah, so I was sort of rewatching that final dinner. And I think so I guess just to kind of lay some groundwork for people who might be more casual viewers, just so people understand. I mean, I guess this is all allegedly, but this is all real. So Gretchen really did do this. This is not something Tamara created through AI. I remember reading about this a long time ago. It was out there on the internet. And so this whole narrative that's getting written, or at least like proposed in the reunion at the end of like Tamara created AI screenshots and there's no record of this or that. Like, again, they kind of brought in this new narrative of like questioning the veracity of all this. And I just want to be clear, this has been out there for a long time. Gretchen, there was a living record of Gretchen liking these posts. And also just so people understand, these weren't just like run-of-the-mill conservative posts. It truly was like hateful rhetoric. So they're bleeping it out on the broadcast network for some reason. But like, the thing they keep bleeping out is the most egregious post, which Gretchen, who's the most amazing deflector I've ever seen, she kind of hangs her hat on just debating one post to sort of distract from the deeper kind of pattern. But the one post in question was basically comparing homosexuality to literally pedophilia. It's like that hateful. It's that bigoted. And, that is obviously, it goes without saying, it's problematic because we do live in a world, regardless of however much it's changing, where you can still be beaten, killed for being gay, for being trans, and anything that fans the flames of hateful rhetoric. Kids are still committing suicide. It's like, this is bad. And Gretchen was liking it. And not only that, there was actually record of Gretchen commenting, on like commenting applause emojis. Like this, I mean, again, I'll use the word allegedly just to protect myself, but this pretty much, we know this happened. It's real. It was being talked about. It happened, right? So having said that, what I was so aware of rewatching the dinner, again, it's the way an issue is being brought in and the way that it's being used by everyone, but I'll start with Tamara, right? So I think it's pretty fucking clear to everyone watching that she's weaponizing this. Like it doesn't feel to me like this is coming from an honest to God, deep investment in gay rights and trans rights and doing the right thing. As people mentioned, she knew about this for years. And so if this were an actual issue of total principle, right, this would have been brought in much earlier and hopefully more constructively on the level of, what, Gretchen, I want to move forward. But kind of like essentially what Gina did. Like, there is something I'm aware of that is going to get in the way of our relationship. We have to deal with this. And I kind of want to confront this in a constructive, clear way, right? That's not what happened, obviously. Now, I also want to be clear because I hear the murmurings online. I don't think that like Tamara had some big plan to drop this bomb in the season finale all season. I think that Tamara is savvy when it comes to reality TV. And I think she's very savvy in the art of reality TV war. I think she came into this season with a game plan of actually wanting to move forward with Gretchen. We saw her in their first scene together. She held out her hand. She said, "Hi, my name's Tamara Judge." I think she was willing. I think what she wanted was just to kind of move forward. And then obviously that didn't happen and the tit for tat happened. And I think for her, my sense is, as anyone who's skilled in the art of war, I think she just had this in her back pocket. I think it was an ace up her sleeve. I think it was something there for her if she needed it. We did get flashbacks in the reunion of her kind of mentioning it on camera to Heather Dubrow. So she was trying to seed it earlier. But yeah, I think it was something that she knew she could kind of fall back on if she needed it. And I think she was smart and savvy enough. Heather's like, this isn't Survivor, but I think as we talked about in the Katie Janela episode, there is a way that this show has become a version of Survivor, especially for the women of OC who are really they've got that survival instinct. And I think that, like any good survivor, Tamara knows you can't really go in with a locked in plan. And I think she was sort of seeing how things played out and playing things by ear. And I think by the end, especially with Gretchen had leveraged at her, it was like time to play this, this card. And she played it. But yeah, having said all that, it absolutely felt like she was using it to essentially take Gretchen down. And, even just that, I really want to pause on the flavor of what we'll call cancel culture. Like, I'm going to weaponize progressive values and humanitarian values to get the world to turn against you. I'm going to use this to punish you. I'm going to use this to win, essentially. We saw Lisa Rinna do a similar thing to Kathy Hilton. I want to take you down. I heard you use a derogatory word about gay people. I don't think if Kyle Richards had said that, Lisa Rinna would have been saying anything. It's like, I'm gonna weaponize this to take you down. So there's that aspect of it, right? And then it's like watching everyone maneuver around that, because then there's Gretchen, of course. You can almost see the wheels turning in her head of like how to play it. And, she's just kind of sitting there clinging to her. Well, this isn't what I stand for. And this isn't actually what I believe, sort of trying to like figure out the way to spin the story in the moment. But what I was also so drawn to was, for example, seeing Shannon and Jen process this information, because in the same way that Tamara's using it as like part of the art of reality TV war, especially with Shannon, but I think also with Jen too, you can kind of feel them sensing what's going on, not wanting to lose an ally in Gretchen, not wanting to give Tamara the benefit of the win, but also kind of knowing there are cameras on them. And now this issue of like gay rights, trans rights has been brought into the arena. And so we have to kind of walk a line here of, I'm not saying they aren't aligned with those rights, but kind of like cosplay that we care, but also sort of preserve ourselves in this arena and not give Tamara what she's going for here. And then in the middle of all of that is Heather in this, which I think she's a really interesting point on the circle, because as we did learn in the reunion, despite kind of how she reacted at that dinner, which I felt read as, I'm hearing this for the first time. I'm shocked. I'm surprised. I'm having a big emotion in the moment. She said it herself at the reunion. I've heard these rumblings for years. And then, it was such a quick back and forth, but it sounded like at the reunion, or maybe it was in the flashback footage, the unaired footage, Tamara saying to her, you even said you had to distance yourself from Gretchen a few years ago because of her views. And then Tamara brought in like the views more explicitly in the flashback, and Heather literally is like, no, I'm not doing this, and like walked out. So there was already kind of an established dynamic where Heather had some awareness of this, and she knew Tamara wanted to bring it on the show, and she was like stomping it down, which we can get into that. I'm kind of curious about that. But then here she is on the show. It's being brought out in front of the camera, and she's having a reaction that I'm sure was in part genuine. But also I'm sort of sitting there like, to what degree is this also being used as performance? If, again, she already knew about this, you know what I mean? And had made a decision not to bring this to the show. And again, I just sort of keep coming back to, it's almost like as I'm saying all this, there's this tension between like the politics of the show versus US politics, because I have to imagine Heather didn't want to get into this on the show because she, much like Tamara, she's like trying to navigate the social dynamics of the cast. And I think they all know you never know when you're going to need a friend, essentially. And you got to kind of really pick your battles, and you got to really choose when you're drawing a line in the sand. And I have to imagine all of them who are savvy to some degree kind of understand you choose your moments wisely. I'm imagining this is part of why Heather maybe didn't want to bring this out more directly. So I know I've been saying a lot all at once. What I'm bringing in on a macro level is this notion of this issue, this political issue being used as a pawn in something else, like a social game, a drive to win, and everyone orienting around that, because that to me feels like part of the circle, because at the heart of it is this issue, right? Gay rights, trans rights. And yet we're not really dealing with that. It's being used politically. Politics is being used politically in the show. And there's just something right there that feels very energetically alive to me. So I will finally stop talking. What's coming up for you?
Well, I think I'll touch on this piece with Heather, because my felt sense after sort of watching the kind of flashback to when Tamara was seeding, this topic or this information, it sounded like they had already had private conversation, Heather and Tamara. And she was like, I don't want this brought in. And my take on that would be that, this is a little closer to Heather's experience because of her children. And I would imagine she's learned a lot more about advocating for human rights when it comes to her children and how things get used politically, or how things get used to position oneself or signal something, probably from her own learning, I would imagine. I kind of felt that even as she was bringing the storyline in with her kids, I just could feel maybe some learning happening around how to navigate that and also bring something to the public in this venue or in this context, but also really be an ally for her children. And so I could feel when she was shutting Tamara down, it's like, I'm not doing that. And I felt her protection for a community of people that would be used in this context in the way that you were describing. That was kind of my take on kind of the whole Heather part of it. But I think the other thing I was feeling the reference to in relation to this dynamic in this group is this survivor, like we're calling out something, like this is somehow survival energy that's being played out in an arena where there is something to survive in this show, how to stay employed, how to work within a friendship group, how to survive these really weird circumstances, to be filming your lives like this, to be public with all of your discoveries and learnings and all the things that go along with it. But when I think about winning, surviving, like the idea that you have to win to survive, as opposed to collaborate in some way for, like a different type of survival, I think that's where I'm kind of wanting to find out a little more, because I personally don't have a relationship with competition in the same way that I see being played out. And so it's always interesting to me to look at how these women are surviving each other as opposed to supporting each other. And I don't like, it's a mystery to me. And it's not like a mystery that like I don't know anything about, but it's a mystery like in this day and age and in this culture, why these women are trying to take each other down like this to stay on a reality TV show, like to what end? What is the end game here? When Tamara's trying to win, when Katie's trying to win, like what's the hill they're standing on? They're the last ones to survive the show. What does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a game where there really are no winners, because even if you win the battle, there's just another one on the horizon and someone else rising up to try to take you down.
That's right. Whether it be age or beauty or how much money someone has or how much play they have on the show or what their storyline is and all the type of political things they may be trying to grab to bring interest into their storyline. It's like, really, what are you doing? Like, I want to ask them, like, what is it that they are promoting?
I mean, it's obviously like a deep philosophical question. Just to come back to Heather for a moment, just because that thread came in and I don't want to lose it. One, I want to say, like, there's an overlap in the way that we experienced in that. Yeah, part of me did pick up on Heather picking up on Tamra using this as part of her agenda and kind of like almost like a voice. Like, I heard you saying, like, protecting the social cause, which I can totally see and feel that. And also kind of the voice that's saying, yeah, I'm not going to be a pawn in your game. Like, don't use me. Like, don't manipulate me. Like, I'm not doing this. Yeah. And then to your point, especially using something that is actually so near and dear to me. Like, don't manipulate me in that way. And I'm not like signing up for this. I'm not playing your game, not with this. Yeah. As I'm saying it out loud, like I'm feeling it move through my heart. It's like, this is actually real and serious to me.
Yes. Real.
Yeah, real. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure part of this is because Tamra was doing it on camera. Right. She was doing it on camera. So I'm sure that's also probably what motivated a lot of Heather, like shutting it down. Because to your point, in terms of collaboration, right? Like, what's interesting to me is as I feel those feelings and those words moving through my heart, I feel the stopping energy. And so there is this part of me, it's like, I wonder what it would have been like for Heather to maybe slow down and really communicate with Tamra, look, I can feel what you're doing here and you're co-opting something that's really meaningful to me. It doesn't feel good. I don't like what you're doing. But again, I am aware it's interesting. Tamra was doing this on camera, so I understand the protective mechanism that comes in to say, no, I'm not doing this. But even still, if she had the presence of mind to get out of that fight or flight protection mode, that might be a really interesting conversation to slow it down and be like, I'm going to name what's coming up for me here. I feel what I think you're doing. I don't like it. Because even that would have been a much more nuanced conversation than what we ultimately got, which was sort of like, let's put Gretchen on trial. And then, we saw where it went, which we'll get to in the reunion, which was just this bizarre spectacle, like fantasy plot twist, whatever. But having said all that, I want to ask you a question because I was sort of, I like to poke around online and just sort of see what people are saying. I don't quite know how I feel about this personally, but I want to check in with you. There were people online kind of saying, basically, they were like disappointed in Heather because they were basically saying, like, when Heather essentially said, Gretchen, you've always been kind and like respectful to my family and to my kids, that they kind of interpreted it as Heather saying, well, you're nice to me and my family. So essentially, I don't care in a way if you're, out there sort of liking this stuff. Like, there were people who felt, I've heard two different versions of it. There are definitely people who I saw online who felt like Heather ultimately gave Gretchen a pass by buying into this narrative of, kind of like maybe these were mindless likes or whatever and kind of letting her off the hook. I will say I touched base with Molly, who, is a frequent co-host on the show. She actually was like, I thought Heather took such a firm stand and like really owned her righteous point of view in a really sort of mature way. I'm just kind of curious, like, where are you with that?
Yeah, I think it's really complex, to be honest. And I feel myself relating to Heather as a human being who is not in this, in all these accusations that are going, sort of reconciling who Gretchen has been to her and her family on a personal level, and also understanding on the flip side of that there have been other people in her life that to her face and to her family have been one way and then learned something very different about them behind the scenes. So I felt actually her position to not fan or fuel Tamra's agenda around taking her down granting her maybe some grace on camera, to like basically not pile on and to give her the complexity of her humanity, but also to say this is very problematic, like it is not okay. Like I heard her at the dinner, saying this is not okay that you're doing these things. When this was initially brought up, she was visibly upset. Whether this was for the cameras, there was something a little performative about that dinner in my experience of Heather, but you know, I didn't really quite know what to make of it. I was just kind of feeling maybe the editing of things and really aware that I don't have all the behind the scene information. So like, when I watch this, I don't, me, I don't do all the little deep dives into, like whether or not this is true. Like I genuinely wanted to, first of all, like not give Gretchen any sort of grace when it comes to following people or liking posts that are clearly that problematic, but recognizing that during COVID, there was a way, or even during the administration, during politics, I was following different platforms to be informed about what type of things were being said. Not that I liked any of those things, but I may have followed things and not, unfollowed them once I got the information I needed. So I was just kind of feeling Heather in that position of understanding that there are reasons we might follow something for information. And then I wasn't quite aware of these liking and unfollowing. Like I didn't really have the kind of the details around that to actually know what she was actually seeing that was problematic. So I don't feel like she was too lenient or too harsh. I don't feel either side of that. I felt her trying to navigate a friendship with someone. And yeah, speaking to the reality of what it's been like in these very polarizing times of having friends that have different viewpoints than we may have, and kind of finding where that line is when it comes to hate, when it comes to actually using ideals or beliefs to take out someone else.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important point because I was thinking about this, like in my journey into the online response, like, there would be people who would kind of be like, who the fuck cares about giving someone like Gretchen grace? And like, yeah, like this is what she gets and this is what she deserves. And, if she's hateful, then, yeah, let it rip. And it's like, but guys, for me, what we watched play out on this show is such a prime example of like why that doesn't actually work. Because I mean, first of all, we saw it, right? Gretchen gets put on the stand and crucified for this. And so what is she doing? She's now doubling down and lying. She's literally just lying. I don't do that. I don't feel that way. I never did it. Like she's scrambling to save herself. And the problem with that then is that whatever part of her, and, let's just be fair to Gretchen, like kind of you're bringing in the complexity of humanity, right? She might have a very, I don't know if I want to say unconscious or semi-conscious or complex relationship to these things where I'm sure there are, I know there are a lot of people like this, right? Who like, well, Heather's speaking to it. It's like, I have personal relationships with people who might be gay or trans or subjugated in some way. And in those interpersonal relationships, I allow there to be a human connection. And then I have my whatever, like my religious point of view or like the point of view I was raised in, the systemic point of view I was raised in that I am clinging to by default because it's all I've known. And my psyche fears challenging that because who knows where that's going to take me in terms of my relationships to other people or my perception of God or this or that. I mean, especially if you're like in like LA and the West Coast, which, does actually draw a lot of people from, all sorts of places. So anyways, the point being, Gretchen goes into survival mode. And whatever these darker parts of her that are co-signing hateful rhetoric, that gets pushed into the shadows. And then she's just covering for it. And it's going to continue to live in the shadows. And this does nothing to actually promote whatever you want to call it, like actual constructive conversation, actual space where someone can open up to new information. It's like, and this is where it becomes sort of like an energetic conversation where it is true, like hate just begets more hate. The desire to win just begets more desire to win. This is what we're watching play out in the political arena. So, I really hear you and Molly, bringing her in, speaking to Heather's awareness of the complexity of the situation and trying to navigate this in a way that kind of essentially respects everyone's humanity without bypassing the severity of the situation. And maybe I feel like she and maybe Gina, I would sort of include in this. It almost feels like they were the ones most caught in a way in Tamra's web, because I felt like their intentions to me felt what we might call the purest in all of this, like that there was like genuine concern for the issue at hand and almost a sense of responsibility of like how this gets navigated. And it kind of almost felt like what we watched happen in real time was the women realizing they did get caught in something. They got caught in Tamra's web at that dinner, and almost like as the dust settled the next morning when they're on the van ride to the airport, kind of like, wait, what is going on here? And what are we participating in to different degrees? This feels gross. And then again, it suddenly gets taken somewhere completely, like it takes a total left turn at the reunion, which we'll get to. But let me just, and I have a question for you about Tamra, but let me just stop there and just see if there's anything you want to say.
I just want to say there's so much here. And maybe, we could look at this from so many angles, because this is one aspect of humanity, where there are differences being played out. And we could plug in race, we could plug in anything here. And the way it's being problematically kind of navigated, I guess, or
used.
Yeah, that's the word I was just going to say. It's like the facilitation of this is so incredibly messy. And it's like the way it's even being played out through production and the way that it's being narrated is, because look, these are supposedly a group of friends that have agreed to put reality, their lives in reality. They're not filming 24/7. These conversations can be had privately if they, and deeply respectfully, like, if I care about you and I see you doing something that is so hateful, I might actually want to bring that to you in a private space to say, you are having an impact on me that is like making or breaking my ability to stay in relationship with you. Like, I need you to see something about how you are talking or how you're behaving that goes against my belief system in a way that I don't think I can align with you, even in a friendship, if you continue this behavior, right? And then instead, let's like get all this information, dig up all this material, and then use it to sort of promote like some sort of virtue signaling and some sort of that's like it feels like a double-edged sword in a way, because it's also, I'm trying to take out an adversary, Tamra against Gretchen. And now I'm going to kind of try to use these people like Gina and Heather, who maybe will confront something in a way that Tamra can't. she's too volatile. She's smart. She knows how to like drop seeds and kind of stay clear of something and then go in for the kill after somebody's, captured something that she's orchestrated. It's like she sets up these, she reminds me, like the way I envision it, it's like, like I'm thinking about animals that like circle prey, and that the way they go about doing it is setting something up. Somebody will go in and, like render them helpless in a way. And then the one that comes in to attack really can take them out. And it's like, it's like a herd mentality. And it's so challenging for me. It just feels so like that's where my heart just like, what am I seeing these women doing to each other?
Well, it's not lost. I don't know if this was intentional on your part or not, but it's not lost on me that, you painted the image of a hunter circling its prey. It's like the circle is that is the vehicle of the kill, the slow, steady stalking and the instinctive survival strategy.
And in that, the distraction.
No, yeah. Well, no, exactly. It's like, we'll distract so that we can go in for the kill. Well, I'll bring in my question. There's a couple things on my mind, but I'll bring in my question since you are talking about Tamara. It's so interesting because people talk about how Tamara, in a way, was a huge part of being responsible for changing the landscape of the Housewives because, prior to her coming on, it was more of like a docu-series that just sort of followed them in their lives. And then there was, interestingly enough, it was between her and Gretchen. There was that pivotal moment way back when where Gretchen was caring for her dying fiance at the time. And Tamara caught wind that she had spent the weekend with family up at Bass Lake. And Tamara confronted her at like one of their, dinners saying, "Did you go to Bass Lake?" And people always point to that moment as kind of like the moment where things shifted and the show started orienting towards like conflict within the ensemble dynamic. And, when I was sort of listening to you talk about Tamara earlier, when you were bringing in this notion of like the survival strategy, the play to win, what's it for? Like part of me really started, because as we explored last episode, and I think as we're exploring now, the OC as a franchise is full of these survivors, really high divorce rates, women who are like kind of building their lives in the wake of either divorces or, whatever, just kind of reclaiming something for themselves. There's a real sense of like, even someone like Emily who's not divorced, the way that she's talked about her humble beginnings, the way that she has married into wealth, like even her, like I feel this sense of like a scrappy survivor in her. Gina certainly post-divorce, Tamara post-divorce. It's in the Orange County field, the field of the show. But part of me was just suddenly like, did Tamara bring this in? Way back when? Like, are we watching in some way like Tamara's personal field of influence as like, which by the way, if true, powerful woman, leader, trendsetter, energetic trailblazer. It's kind of like probably a huge part of why the show suffered so much without her. But are we in some ways watching the ripple effect of this scrappy fighter survivor who came on the show and was playing to win from the beginning and kind of altered the DNA of the entire show for seasons and seasons to come?
Absolutely. I think that's true. And I think that Katie is not unlike Tamara in my perspective. Like the way I read, she also shifted something in my perspective by bringing kind of that third wall, that we've talked about before. Like, I think I don't know if we were talking one time or you might have talked about this on the podcast, but kind of compared her to the reality Vantis of Salt Lake City, where there was this relationship to the show before being on the show, even though she denies that on some level. But there's like this use of these third parties, whoever they are, like the people that they contact and let, like they have all these interviews going on. So there's like this thing that's happening now that's happening outside of the filming that's going on that then gets used as part of the narrative of the show. So they're starting to control something here. And I think you're right when you say Tamara kind of shifted something there by just the nature of who she is. I would be curious, like when you think about her energetically as an archetype, what is your perspective?
I'm just laughing because this isn't going to sound flattering. I want to be very clear. Like, Tamara, my understanding is she grew up in like a middle upper class, like, because sometimes there's this like narrative that she grew up like very poor and without any means. And she's been very clear that's not true. So I just want to say this image has not, this is not like a socioeconomic commentary. This is like an archetypal energy. But yeah, it's like I seeing her as like the little orphan in an alley, like surviving. I'll do like kind of like I'll do anything for a buck. I'll shine your shoes. I'll clean your chimney. I'll do whatever odd like jobs you need around the house. And I'll also kind of like, again, I'm not saying I actually don't think Tamara is financially dishonest. That's actually one of the things I like about her. I feel like there's something very kind of grounded and solvent about her and the way that she lives within her means. Like there's something very smart and savvy about Tamara, which is part of what I like about her. But in the archetype, like this scrappy survivor, will like pull money out of your pocket, like while she's doing the job and getting paid for it. Just like, yeah, I'm just hearing the words play to win, play to win, play to win. But like, I'm going to survive no matter what. I'm going to survive no matter what. I'm going to survive no matter what, and yeah, I mean, we've watched her, I mean, look, we sort of caught her deep into her marriage with Simon, but my understanding is, single mom with like a kid, like raising her on her own, feels like Simon helped her, transition to a different kind of life, and then that ran its course and she was able to use the show. Again, this is part of what I like about her, to create a different kind of life for herself. So I just see her as that scrappy little orphan who sort of learned, like, I got to do whatever I got to do to survive, and I'm going to survive, and I'm going to do it well. I mean, you know what it actually reminds me of? This is a much more generous way of framing the archetype. It reminds me of the movie Citizen Kane. And, for anyone who hasn't seen it, Orson Welles starting out as like this little boy who sort of gets sent off and away from his family and kind of creates this whole empire, by this sheer force of will, whatever the cost. And that's both his power and it's also his downfall. But it's like that. It's like, I kind of learned early on, like, I got to like rely on my own and I got to survive and I'm going to do it. You bet your ass I'm going to do it. I mean, again, when I say it, part of me likes that about her. I like that survivor. It's strong. Scrapper. And I think it's kind of what she and Vicky have in common. And I think they both, I mean, with Vicky, it feels very different to me, but I think they both have that kind of like independent force of will of like, whatever happens, I'm going to be okay because I'm going to do this.
Yeah. I just kind of, for some reason, when I think about survival with her, I don't think about it from a financial lens. Like her survival depends, or her felt sense, when I can like deeply take her in, it's like she doesn't necessarily act as if she cares about the way that she's being seen, but she deeply cares about the way she's being seen. And it's like, there's like a split that I always feel in relation to her. You know how there's like an energy that comes in to mix things up, to like kind of create something new. Like that to me, that speaks to kind of what you were talking about when the force that she was sort of altered something in this show. She has the ability to open something up, but also collapse something in her sort of chaotic nature, the way that she brings stuff through. It's like a force. It's like a tornado, really. And then she kind of steps out. She leaves. And so it's like, it's an interesting play where she's being seen as this destructive sort of chaos change maker, but then she steps out and steps back, which is where the split for me kind of like, I'm curious about that. Like, I think there's a fragility to her that she can't tolerate what she actually creates.
Right. Which I think we saw play out in the reunion, right? Where she ended up paying a price for what she created. But before we get there, yeah, I mean, because I think you're basically saying this, but I was going to say, to me, that also just feels reflective of like her energetic pattern within herself, where what I really see with her is rage and regret, like classic rage and regret. Like something swells in her, it overtakes her. And I think to your point, wow, I'm having feelings as I say this. She has tremendous life force energy. I love the way you talked about like the cyclone, chaotic change maker. Like that feels like her to a T. Like, and again, it's like I was saying before, like that actually is part of a testament to her power. Like I'm suddenly feeling her leadership. It's funny that I never really thought of her that way before, given again how pivotal she's actually been to the show. Like she left, the show failed. They had to bring her back. Like there's a power to Tamra and there's a leadership. And I think it is connected to this life force that moves through her. But, it's always felt like, both in terms of what we may call her truth telling, like her way of like perceiving things and seeing things, and maybe kind of like what you're bringing in, this life force, the way that strong feelings like want to move through her. Obviously, it just feels like none of this was ever supported, right? It feels like she got a message like too much. I mean, certainly that's what the message she was getting from Simon. So from a place of pattern, it's like, Tamra, even the show itself, like, again, if we look at everything as pattern, there's an ambivalence with the show, like towards her. Like she's both vital for the show. People resent her on the show. She's rewarded for her behavior. She's also like vilified for her behavior. And I think that reflects also her own internal relationship to the stuff in her where, the classic rage and regret, right? Like I hold it back. I suddenly let loose with all this rage. Oh shit, I made a mess. This is going to become the reason why I pull back again. But now I'm pulling back. I'm going to let it build. And then it's going to explode again. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, we could call it expansion, contraction. But I think, to your point, it's like, she steps out of the room. She steps away from the mess that she created. I feel like I saw this play out in her relationship with Shannon. Yeah, that there's like a lot of rage and regret, and that she opens up, lets through all this emotions, like acts reactively, and then retreats and shuts down in shame. And I think it's hard for her to know how to orient there because there usually is grains of truth and merit in what she's bringing to the table. So like even last season, if we're going to bring Shannon in, like she was the one voice essentially saying, Shannon, there's an issue here. And essentially saying you don't take responsibility for yourself. The way she brought it in was chaotic. It was destructive. It was all these things. It was cruel. It was a vehicle of cruelty. And so then she gets vilified for it. And it's like she shuts down, like she feels ashamed. But then I can also, as I say that, I can feel the confusion of like, but wait, there are things here that are also true. And why am I getting penalized? Why am I the one getting penalized for everything? Which in this case, I'm looking at fucking Shannon, who literally could have killed people. She's getting off scot-free. And meanwhile, I'm just the fucking bad guy. Like, it's like, I think it's so hard for her to understand her role in all of this. It's almost like she's lost in the cyclone.
When I felt the split, or I don't know if split is even the right word. I think it's like the underbelly of creation. There's like an element of destruction, right? Like when something is being created, there's two things. There's like a disruptor in her, something that disrupts, like, hey, this isn't okay. And it could move towards creating something like, if she was genuinely connected to her, like a good intent, but it feels like she gets lost in the power of disturbing or the destruction. It's like something happens around power with her. And yeah, that's all I have.
No, I love what you're bringing in because I call her the truth teller, and I always hesitate with that for anyone because it's like, well, who's to say what is truth, right? Truth is subjective. But I love that you're languaging it as the disruptor, the disruptor. And, because like, as sure like Shiva as a deity destroys in order to create the new. Like that's what we do. We die to ourselves, we rise from the ashes. It's like death and rebirth. Like destruction has a holy sacred relationship. And so just on a purely like sort of basic energetic level, if Tamara is a natural born disruptor with this strong life force energy and this capacity to channel this energy to disrupt things, and that was shut down early on. I mean, we've seen her mother at the very least, like a very controlled, controlling. Her mother is clear, like as I'm saying this, she does not feel comfortable with wild, chaotic emotions. And more like I want to say her mother's not comfortable with spontaneity. Her mother's not comfortable with aliveness. Her mother's not comfortable with change, I feel, as I'm saying this. Wildness. And so then it's like if Tamara gets the message, no, your disruptor is bad and wrong, shut that shit down. Well, that's the original collapse. And so as Tamara, it's I learned to hold this back. I learned to hold this back. And then it comes out. And then there's anger around that, unexpressed rage. And then when it comes out, because you can't stop a life force, right? So it's going to come out. And, I've always said this. I feel like the show, because people say this a lot, and I experience it on her podcast. People often report she's very different in real life, that she's nice, calm, understated. And I've always felt like the show gives her a vehicle. It's not that she's playing a part for the show, but I think the show gives her permission for a part of herself that generally gets held back. And so then that's what creates sort of the rage, regret cycle in her, the wildness, the collapse. And then again, kind of what you're saying, I'm going to disrupt shit, but then I'm going to kind of walk away from it and not take responsibility for it. And I want to say, like, I've compared her before, and I'm feeling this again now to like Lisa Rinna, for example. And we talked about this on this podcast, like Lisa Rinna's capacity to be the destroyer for the sake of the good, like to call things out for the sake of the good. And, that's kind of how I experienced the possible evolved version of Monica on Salt Lake City. Like she came in and she really disrupted something. I mean, I think Katie has that in her too. It's like we see these archetypes. You see it a lot in reality TV. It's like people who are wholly disruptor or could be wholly disruptors, but it just feels like they weren't ever supported to know that for themselves. And so then it's just, to our point, chaos, and then they're just at odds with their own chaos. But on a show that kind of rewards it while also tisks them for it at the same time.
That's the part where I feel heartbreak. It's like, yeah, I see you're on something. Go ahead.
Well, no, I have one last sentence and then I want to hear what you say. No, because we talked about the political issue getting used. I just suddenly felt the place where like people like Tamara and Katie and whomever, they get used by this show.
Yeah, that's it. That's right where I was. It's like, it's so heartbreaking to feel someone's potential to create, or I don't know, to expand both inside themselves and potentially bring their gifts to others in a way, and then to have it be captured. This is, again, the manipulation or the capturing that I was feeling within the vortex of the circle that gets created here. It's like a cage that they're locked inside that holds the same, they're like playing out the same exact experience that they've had when there's actually potential here, that gets totally used for the benefit of something else. And completely, like, I can feel, again, that fragility, the way these entities attract people like these women to come and play something out on this stage in this way. And the potential they might have to actually realize something gets totally used and squashed and like almost made fun of, or I don't know, like, I don't even know what to say, like just ridiculed. And I feel like that's where I want to hold my line of integrity with my own being, because this is always my inner conflict of being a part of an audience that participates in some way in someone's journey. I think of child actors. I think of like, there's so many people in these, I don't know, sort of public, I don't know, positions, I guess, that I really feel for. And I don't know how to reconcile something there.
Well, I would say, and this feels important to say for everyone listening to this, you actually are participating in a different way just right now in this moment. You are seeing and hearing something in Tamara that I don't think gets seen and heard. And I mean, even probably in her everyday life, like even if she weren't on the show, like if what we're talking, especially if we're talking about is true, like that's got shut down in her, like there's actually like a sacred witnessing here. And I want to say like, that's not, I don't want to minimize that because, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, even though I try to pretend that no one listens to it, I have heard from Bravo celebrities who have found it. And, without getting into specifics, I want to say actually the impact for some of them has been profound, like to feel seen and heard and understood. So I just want to say that to you because I hear you wrestling with something, like not to minimize the role you're playing energetically right now in what you are naming, witnessing, and feeling on behalf of not just Tamara, but like really the whole archetype, and the other women who, have a relationship to this archetype. I have more to say, but did you need to say anything in response to that?
Yeah, maybe just to someone like Tamara or to the disruptors out there, stay. Stay for your impact. Don't bow out there. Show up for what you're disrupting and don't double down on something. Let something emerge from that disruption.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's so interesting because you were kind of like trying, I believe, to like name the flavor of like the show's attitude. I think you said ridiculed. And what keeps coming up for me, honestly, it's like what keeps coming up for me, it's like Lisa Vanderpump on Vanderpump Rules. It's I'm casting you for a reason. I want you to perform in a certain way that's going to make the show successful, but then I'm going to like shame you for it. I'm going to like tisk you. Oh, what are you doing? Like I'm going to get off on it and benefit from it, but then I'm also going to like take a moral position on it. Like it's confusing. And, I've likened kind of Andy Cohen before to that Lisa Vanderpump energy. And, again, I want to get into the reunion because I really felt him as like the circus master of all of this, like sitting in his center seat. But that's sort of what I really feel. It's like, I don't know, like there was even an exchange recently on Watch What Happens Live where people were questioning Tamara's behavior. And she said, well, it's my job or something like that. Like I'm doing a good job. And Andy was like, well, it's not really your job, which I mean is actually true. But like, even in that, I just sort of felt like, I'm like, Andy, are you really taking responsibility for the role you play in all of this and the unspoken demands that are on these people and like the game that you've set up here? There's just, I just noticed with them constantly, there's sort of, and I think it's probably very unconscious on his part, but there's kind of like a posturing that denies his own participation, much like Lisa Vanderpump with the kids on Vanderpump Rules. So again, it just sort of comes back to we're using you, but we're also washing our hands of you and kind of distancing ourselves from you. And even just saying that, I can feel how it feels to be used. And having said that, it's just so interesting because I want to come back to that dinner where it's like, that is what it's like. Tamara was using the issue and using the other people in the realm of the show to exact her cause against Gretchen. And I feel like that is part of the residue that they were all feeling. And it's even what we're talking about with like Heather shutting things down in that unaired footage. It's like, oh shit, I got used. And it's just, yeah. So it's sort of like this cycle of like people using others. It feels like that's a huge part of what we're watching here. And what I then want to bring in on the political, more systemic issue, coming back to the systemic and maybe suddenly just sort of feels so obvious. It's like, it is the way that like political issues will get used to win, So it's like, what's good for the goose won't be good for the gander. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of examples. I'm sure there's so many, but it's like, I don't know, like the one that springs to mind, this seems so innocuous, but it's like, when the right wanted to vilify like Hillary for emails, right? But then like when it comes out that like Trump had his own email stuff, you know what I mean? It's like no one wants to, or even like the Epstein thing. It's like, here's the fear. I almost like don't even want to name real issues because it's like I feel like I'm stepping into like a landmine, but it's like everyone is excited for people to be named, if it's the other side. But it's like, obviously over the years, there's a lot of conversation about like sexual misconduct amongst politicians. And obviously, like there's a lot of conversation about Trump, rightfully so, but then how, if, for example, it might be about Bill Clinton, people might not want to hear it, or if Hillary maybe knew something about Bill Clinton and what he did, people might not want to hear it. You know what I mean? Or, same with the right, like the way they'll excuse the murmurings about Trump. It's like in this drive to win, we talked about this in the OC episode with Molly. It's like principle can get abandoned and issues can get used. And so it's suddenly kind of like with this, it's not even about like for the opposing side, it's about ha ha ha, you get taken down, see, we're right. But then if there's similar self-responsibility to be taken by that side, they don't want to look at it. So again, it's like the issue, and I'm not saying for everyone, of course, but I'm saying for a lot of people, the issues get hijacked and used to win rather than actually dealing with the heart of the issue in a real way. And that's just kind of the flavor of what I feel here.
Yeah, like the actual issues that are problematic are not actually being addressed. They're being used to take down the other positions, the other side. Yeah, it's like rather than actually looking at something and saying, how can we support this changing? It's they just take the issue and keep it. Like there's no movement towards doing anything differently. It's just taking something that's already happening and saying, ha ha ha, look, this happened.
Well, and coming back to what you brought in earlier, it's like, isn't that the nature of politics, at least contemporary politics, where it's just like, it just feels like, this is my perception, of course, but for both sides, so much of this is about power and control, at least in terms of like the older generations. Maybe there's some shift now, happening with like the younger generations rising up. But like historically, it's been about power and it's been about control. And yes, using the issues in order for our side to gain power and control. And I think that's why a lot of people like myself have just become disillusioned with just our very sort of two-party system in the first place, because it just sort of feels like two sides of the same coin, much like Gretchen and Tamara feel like two sides of the same coin. It's playing to win and using issues to win to hold on to some illusion of power and control. But kind of like to your point about like the women in the OC in terms of our government, like where has this been going? Like we've been engaged in such an extreme version of like trying to win. And it's just like the pendulum is literally like, it's literally like ping pong, because Trump won, then he lost, now he won again. It's like, we're volleying back and forth between the same kind of polarized spheres. And like, where is this all going?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's that very picture that you just painted is like the circling, right? And it's like, there's a pendulation in the circle, but there's also distraction in the circling. And there's no movement other than some circular, there's no movement out. And so that's when I'm like, okay, what can I turn to that is away from this manipulation or this capturing? It's like, I have to like literally turn things off and tune in to my own experience in relation to the things that I'm attracted to step out to see what's playing out in the natural world, what's playing out in the unseen, what's playing out in the things that aren't being named, as you said, that are being sort of relegated to something like we're not going to look at, because I want to move towards, I don't know, creating something new. So I don't mind so much in the show or in politics, the disruptors that are out there, the ones that are saying, hey, take a look at this. This is happening. Take a look at this. But if we're just taking a look at it to then point fingers back and forth and to like try to I don't know, like say half truths about he said, she said, whatever. It's like it doesn't go anywhere, like you just said. So in something like these reality shows with housewives, if this were to go somewhere, like when I feel the most hopeful watching these shows is when I actually see them wanting to promote each other, somehow using this platform to actually support these communities that you are calling out, to say, wow, I used to think this way about this. And because I've been confronted by the reflection that has been shown to me by showing myself, I want to do something different. I could see some of these women taking the reins and doing it differently, lending themselves towards actually creating something for women that they could, step into. But that's not what's happening. They're caught in something. And it is like that old sort of excitement of seeing power being used against each other for the sake of seeing where it will go.
Yeah, it's almost like when I take in that dinner, it is. It's like, I'm just circling back around now to that notion of fear. It's like an issue is brought in. It's being used in a disruptive way, not for the highest good, but to instead take someone down, to vilify, to weaponize. And then everyone sort of organizing around it from a place of fear, of like wanting to preserve their position in the power structure, not wanting to be taken down by the cast, not wanting to be taken down by the viewers, and kind of like jockeying for the right political position within that context. And it's sort of like, yeah, there's sort of just voices that aren't breaking through. If we're talking about like spontaneous aliveness, the voice that's saying, Tamara, you're weaponizing this. This isn't okay. The voice that's saying, Gretchen, you're full of shit. You absolutely did this. Take responsibility for it. Maybe the voice of Gretchen that says, yes, I have hate in my heart. I mean, not maybe that she would quite say it that way, but like I have judgments. I have points of view that are not politically correct, to say the least. Like the spontaneous aliveness, it's being kept under wraps.
Yeah, it doesn't get picked up. Look at Gina. She's like, look, you two women, Gretchen and Tamara, have a personal vendetta and it is being played out here. What are you doing? Like, that's what this is really about. What is it that is unresolved between the two of you?
Well, and then bringing this back to the political arena, or even the examples I just brought in, it's like, if I am someone who has a deep survivalist fear and feels like so much is on the line, and I am looking to these politicians to be the ones to see me through, it's like, I can't acknowledge the possibility that maybe, Bill Clinton did some, bad things and maybe Hillary knew about it, because it's like conceding that feels like, yeah, I'm like jeopardizing my own safety, like my own capacity to survive. It's like the other side wins. So I have to hold tight.
Yeah. And that's the delusion, that's what they want you to believe. But if you actually let it in, that this is possible and these things went down, and you were supporting people that also had the capacity to do unspeakable things, then you can actually tell yourself you don't know you don't have to buy it all. You don't have to go all in. People are complex. And just because they hold a position of power that happens to be on the side you're in does not make them impervious to any sort of wrongdoing. That's insane. And if you're not willing to let people have the fullness of who they are and then make decisions based on that, then you are totally buying into the whole game.
Right. And this comes back to the complexity of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And the lack of self-responsibility.
And what I would say is, and I have a question for you actually, but what I would say is I think part of why Tamra does continue to, in a lot of ways, be the life force or the lifeblood of OC is even though she weaponizes it and she doesn't use it for good often, she is kind of the one who is letting something spontaneous come through, even with her machinations and even with her strategy and her planning. She still lets something come through that is actually alive. I think she's the most connected to the life force within. Again, it gets away from her. She contracts, she rages and regrets, but I do feel like she lets something come through her in a way that's pretty uncensored, for better or for worse. Whereas, I think a lot of the others are much more tightly controlled in that franchise.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also speaks to her fragility to me. She has a thinner container.
And I also think there is a way that she even gets used by the cast.
Oh, completely. And that's what makes her so furious.
And it's the same thing. It's like, it's just like I was talking about, like the person who has to maybe concede that maybe the person, they want to vote for did something bad or naughty. It's like, it's a similar thing for Tamra. It's like, if I concede these things they're saying about me, it's almost like I'm totally wiping myself out.
Right.
Everything that I like, even the seeds of truth get wiped out. Like I get wiped out. So I can't give them an inch in this power struggle. I can't give them an inch in this survival strategy.
Yeah. What if she actually did?
Which again is sort of what happened at the reunion. But here's my question for you. I'm going to sort of turn this question around on you. What do you, and maybe actually I'll drop in too, because I didn't actually fully drop in to like really visualize. So I think it might be interesting to do it this time around. I don't know. I'm getting chills just saying this. I don't know why. What do you perceive as Gretchen's archetypal energy?
Oof, it's so hard to get past the dark aspect of her. But she just feels super young to me, is all I came to. It's almost like an energy that feels more of it's weird. She feels like I would be so careful around her. She doesn't feel trustworthy at all, but there's something playful about her. There's something that feels, almost like more of just like not very deep, just like nymphish, just, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, I feel bad because it feels sort of judgmental maybe, but there's like a lack of development, like someone that's not, when I say young, I mean like hasn't arrived at an understanding of what depth is.
Well, I feel like you're reading her energy, like her actual current day energy.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think it feels on point. I mean, I think what I visualize is maybe what I would call my perception of like her essence. And maybe we're just interpreting the question differently, but my perception of her essence is not totally unrelated to the things you're picking up on, but it's kind of maybe what I would call like the evolved version. Like when I visualize Gretchen's kind of possible essence, I see her first of all as like this showgirl, like totally like, like 50s showgirl, like big feathers, like I don't know if it's like a feather fan, but and she's kind of like hiding behind the feathers discreetly and playfully and coyly. And it's like she's beautiful, like an object of attraction, a showgirl. And it's almost like the vibe I get off of it is she's like, well, trickster for sure, a woman of many faces. Like there's mischief here. And you kind of never know what you're going to get. And she wears, many faces, many masks, playful, but it's almost like inviting you in to a bit of like a labyrinth. Like it's like she'll seduce you into her show. And it's almost like you'll be so intoxicated by her beauty and her charm and her sexuality and her sort of like almost puckish, like Midsummer Night Dream puckish mischief. It's almost like the equivalent of like she'll spin you around several times and you'll be a little bit dizzy and then you'll stumble off the stage. But like the most elevated version of it, it's almost like, well, I mean, maybe this is a form of a disruptor, but it's a very different quality of disruption. But it's like she kind of snaps you out of the usual routine, spins you around, gets you a little bit dizzy. You don't know which way is up, which way is down. It's almost like Alice in Wonderland. And then you kind of come out of it like different, like you're seeing things different. Like she gets you to question your reality, which is interesting that like I'm using that language because I think you could say what we're watching and why maybe Tamara gets so triggered by her is that, I think we're in agreement. There's a huge relationship to like deception and lies and lack of congruency in Gretchen. And it's almost like, it feels like it's crazy making for someone like Tamara. Like you don't know which way is up and which way is down. And she says one thing and means another. And she pretends to be one thing and is another. But I can see this sort of like elevated version of it. But it's very, like I said, it's like a showgirl. It's unpretentious. This isn't like, going and seeing like the spiritual guru who's going to it's
not sophisticated.
Exactly. It's like in the billiard rooms. It's in the casinos. It's like, she's out there. Yeah. Like kind of like in the trenches of.
Yeah. I love how you described it. It's definitely more visual for sure. Right in line. And I think the part that I was like, really didn't know how to talk about is the part that I don't trust, which is, if in this disorientation, what comes up and out is something that she doesn't like, she will push you off that stage. Like in your dizziness, if you reveal something that's just, coming out of this sort of disorientation and she doesn't resonate with it or like it, or if it threatens her in some way, you are now gonna like, that's where she can just turn and it feels like it's vicious. There's a viciousness to her.
Well, again, do you mean in an essence way or in a kind of current energy way?
I don't know. That's a hard question. I don't really, I definitely currently, but it feels, I have never known her any other way.
Well, can I answer? I'll answer my own question. Like, yeah, because what I feel in the essence version of, like, yeah, there's no bullshit for sure. And like, I love the image of like, if you don't come correct, she'll push you off the stage. But like, in a very, like I said, no bullshit, like, it's like, like you don't fuck with her, and you either come correct or you don't come at all. It feels very boundaried. It feels very strong. It feels very clear. But yeah, like, the unevolved version of it where she's not coherent and she's playing games with people, not from a constructive way, but from a destructive way. It's like, I mean, look, we've watched all season. She is vicious. Like she's vicious, but she hides it behind being a victim, quite honestly. So I think, yeah. So again, I think my interpretation of this is I think you keep feeling into like who she currently is. And I'm kind of bringing in her possible essence. Let me ask you one last question related to all of this. Do you have a sense of like, what is it about these two, Gretchen and Tamara, that is so triggering to them? Like, why are they so hooked into each other? Like, what is it that we're watching play out?
Well, my first hit is that they reflect the thing that they are in themselves that they don't see. I was going to say something about like, how like you really hate something in someone that you carry and you haven't like seen it in yourself or know it in a way that you can hold it for yourself. It's like you just like have to detest it in the other person. And I think it has something to do with their capacity for cruelty.
Yeah. Do you have more to say about that?
It was kind of the first hit.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I think what came up for me from Tamara's point of view kind of was seeing this exaggerated version. I mean, I'm so aware of what I just said about like Gretchen will be vicious, but then hides behind being a victim. And there's a way, again, it's very different in tone, but there's a way, obviously, that we all see that kind of Tamara will victimize herself after being cruel in ways. And I almost wonder if there's something about that reflection for her. Again, it's so different. I experience them so differently in this regard, but still, I wonder if there's like a trigger for Tamara around this kind of heightened version of someone who is sort of disowning, definitely a certain strength, disowning a viciousness, disowning a deeper power, and victimizing herself. And then conversely with Gretchen, the way that I experienced it was like, yeah, because Tamara is willing to more directly own the viciousness and the cruelty. Like she doesn't hide it too much. And I wonder if that's triggering for Gretchen. You know, it's sort of like a direct expression.
Certainly brings it out.
Yeah, because it's like, in terms of just even the essences we just talked about, right? Because I do want to say, I did actually close my eyes and actually visualize Tamara. And it was very much to what we're speaking to. I just saw all this like bright light energy just moving through her column and her arms and her, like her torso and her arms and her hands and coming out of her mouth and just like her kind of like looking up to the heavens and just being this conduit for this like life force energy. And so it's almost like Gretchen I experience. I mean, we talk about circle as like the hall of mirrors where all you get is just kind of one mirror reflection and then another mirror reflection. And it just, you never get behind the mirrors. And it's almost like Tamara allows herself aspects of that spontaneous, direct current of aliveness that I don't think Gretchen ever allows herself. Maybe when she's drunk, but like, that's it. And I think conversely, Gretchen might reflect, because Tamara does have such pride in being direct and being a truth teller and a straight shooter. But there are ways, as we know, that that's not true, that she does sort of play her own games with sidestepping the truth and talking around things and twisting things. And it's almost like Gretchen maybe, kind of hits that part in her where it's like, I'm not totally the straight shooter all the time that I think I am. So maybe there's an integration that wants to happen there.
Mm-hmm. For sure. On both sides. Yep.
I feel like we've actually covered a lot for now. I do want to get to the reunion. So let's maybe just come to an organic pause. And we are going to reconvene next week, now that we've laid the groundwork, to talk about where this went in the reunion. And in my mind, how it all went left. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, Piper, as always, I so appreciate you being here and hanging out in the space with me. You guys can follow me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN. And you can always head over to my website, hollywoodreadings.com, if you're curious to learn more about my work. And we will pick this back up next week. Until then, I will see you on the flip side. Bye.